It's kind of funny how often we hear terms like holistic health or manifestation or even just good vibes these days.
Mm-hmm. They're everywhere.
Totally. Like in our workout classes, self-help books, even just chatting with friends. But have you ever really stopped to think where these ideas, these phrases we just accept, actually come from?
It's true. They're so baked into our everyday language now, we often don't even register their deeper origins, which can be pretty surprising sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We're doing a deep dive into New Age spirituality. Now, I know that term might immediately make you think of, like, crystals and maybe some chanting.
Sure, the common images.
Right. But as we'll get into, you'll see it's way more complex and honestly much more pervasive than you might first think.
Yeah, definitely. We've pulled together a whole stack of sources for this academic stuff, historical texts, critiques, the works. Our goal really is to try and pin down what this movement actually is, look at its core beliefs, trace back its pretty fascinating history.
And the practices too, right? There are so many.
Oh, absolutely. Practices, its massive cultural impact. We'll even touch on the criticisms leveled against it and, where it seems to be heading now in our super digital world.
So by the end of this, the hope is you'll have a much clearer, more nuanced picture of this whole spiritual landscape
Yeah.
because it genuinely shapes a lot of modern life, whether we realize it or not. So yeah, let's get into it.
Well,
First off, defining New Age spirituality is, well, tricky. It's not like traditional religions, is it? There's no pope, no single holy book, no central church.
not at all. That's a key point. It's often described more like a decentralized, really eclectic network. Some academics even call it a hodgepodge.
A hodgepodge.
And that's not necessarily a criticism, it's descriptive, because it reflects a core idea, unmediated individualism. This means your own personal subjective experience is the ultimate spiritual authority, full stop.
So no external rules or dogmas needed.
Exactly. It rejects those external authorities, the hierarchies you see in established religions. It's radically democratic in that sense. This is really where that whole idea of my truth comes from, the belief that your personal truth is inherently valid.
Okay, so if individual experience is king, does that naturally lead to that pick and mix approach, the spiritual supermarket idea you mentioned?
It really does. It's the logical outcome. People feel free to construct their own personalized spirituality, combining bits and pieces from different traditions, different practices, whatever resonates with them personally.
Is the picking random, though? Or are there patterns?
Well, it's not totally random. You definitely see trends. There's often a leaning towards maybe more exotic or romanticized cultures like ancient Egypt or Celtic traditions or various Eastern mysticisms, while, say, mainstream Western religious traditions might be less appealing in that mix. And some critics, they take it further. They argue this whole approach structurally mirrors late-stage capitalism spirituality as a form of consumer choice.
That's interesting. And this focus on the individual also explains why people prefer the word spirituality over religion, right?
No, absolutely. Religion tends to bring up images of organized institutions, dogma, hierarchy, all the things New Age generally pushes against.
Whereas spirituality feels more personal.
Exactly. More personal, experiential, and unmediated journey. For many adherents, spirituality isn't separate from life. It is life, like a project of personal growth. So, the idea of a single, centralized New Age church just wouldn't make sense. It's fundamentally contradictory to the core ethos.
Okay, structure makes sense. Let's shift to the philosophy underneath it all, the metaphysics. How does New Age fundamentally rethink God and reality? It seems to boil down to monism and pantheism.
That's the bedrock. Yeah, monism is the starting point. The idea that all reality, everything, is ultimately just one single, undifferentiated thing, whether you call it substance, energy, consciousness, whatever.
So the differences we see are just surface level.
Essentially, yes. They're seen as illusory. Like one source puts it pretty bluntly, ultimately, there is no difference between God, a person, a carrot, or a rock. They're all just expressions of this one underlying reality. That's where you get the classic phrase, all is one.
Right. All is one. So if everything is part of this single reality, what does that mean for God? Is God separate or?
No, not separate at all. If all is one, then logically that one is divine. And that takes you directly to pantheism, the belief that the universe, reality itself, is God. So all is God and God is all.
Which is totally different from, say, the Abrahamic idea of a God outside of creation.
Completely different. Divinity isn't some external being you worship. It's an immanent reality that you experience within everything, including yourself.
And it's usually framed as an impersonal force, isn't it? Like the universe or source or cosmic consciousness. Kind of like the Force in Star Wars.
That's actually a really common and helpful analogy people use. Yes, it's almost always conceived as an impersonal energy or consciousness, not a personal God with intentions and emotions in the human sense.
Okay, so why is this shift from a transcendent creator to an immanent impersonal force so important?
Because it completely flattens the hierarchy. A transcendent creator implies a separation, a fundamental difference in kind between God and creation. But if you dissolve God into an immanent energy field that everything is part of, well, then the individual being part of that energy is also inherently divine.
Ah, so that's the link.
That's the crucial link. This metaphysical groundwork makes the core New Age project possible, which is essentially self-deification. It's about realizing your own inherent divinity, shifting your identity from being a mere creature to understanding yourself as a co-creator, a part of, and even a controller of this divine energy.
Wow, so that really puts the individual front and center. The whole point becomes realizing your own inner divinity, not seeking salvation from outside.
That's the absolute core of it. The main goal is discovering your true self or higher self.
Hmm.
The belief system posits that humans are fundamentally divine beings who've just
Forgotten their divinity.
Exactly. So the human condition isn't seen as, say, sinfulness, like in some traditions. It's framed as spiritual amnesia. You just need to wake up and remember who you really are.
Which means traditional ideas like original sin or the fall of man are completely out the window.
Completely rejected. Salvation, or enlightenment, or whatever term you use, isn't something granted from above. It's something you actualize from within yourself by remembering that divine nature.
This sounds like it borrows from Eastern ideas like reincarnation and karma, but maybe twists them a bit.
It definitely borrows, but reinterprets them pretty radically. In many traditional Eastern views, reincarnation can be seen as part of a difficult, potentially painful cycle, samsara, driven by karma, something you want to escape.
Right.
But New Age thought often reframes reincarnation much more positively. It becomes this continuous and progressive educational journey. Each life is a chance for the soul to learn lessons and evolve. Death isn't an end, just a transition.
And karma, is it still about cosmic justice?
It softened quite a bit. It's often seen less as a rigid, inescapable law of cause and effect, and more as a kind of therapeutic feedback mechanism. It helps you learn and grow, guiding you towards better choices, but maybe without the heavy sense of cosmic debt.
So it's still a kind of work salvation, but the work is self-improvement.
Precisely. The works are things like self-healing, self-discovery, personal growth exercises, meditation actions aimed at uncovering that inner divinity rather than acts of piety towards an external god.
The ultimate goal, then, is this kind of therapeutic liberation. Freedom from suffering by realizing you're already divine and powerful.
That's a good way to put it. And it represents a really profound westernization of Eastern concepts. Many traditional Eastern paths focus on dissolving the ego, overcoming the self. But New Age often takes the techniques meditation, yoga, mindfulness, and applies them towards a very Western goal. Enhancing the self, empowering the self, ultimately glorifying the individual self. Here, the self isn't the problem, it's the God waiting to be discovered.
Okay, so where did this whole complex blend of ideas actually come from? It feels both ancient and very modern at the same time.
It absolutely does. And it didn't just spring up fully formed. You can really trace its development in, let's say, two major phases. First, you had this 19th century flowering of esoteric thought that kind of laid the groundwork.
Okay.
And then in the mid-20th century, various cultural forces came together to really popularize these ideas and bring them into the mainstream.
Got it. So what were some of those key 19th century roots?
Well, one major one was spiritualism. It exploded in the mid-1800s. Think of figures like the Fox sisters, who claimed they could communicate directly with spirits.
Seances and mediums, that sort of thing.
Exactly. The radical part was the idea of direct personal communication with the spirit world, bypassing priests or ministers entirely. This really paved the way for that New Age emphasis on unmediated individual experience. And people like Andrew Jackson Davis developed whole philosophies around spiritual evolution.
And I've heard the Theosophical Society was hugely influential.
Oh, absolutely pivotal. Founded by Helena Blavatsky in 1875. Theosophy essentially created the main intellectual blueprint for a lot of New Age thought. Blavatsky did this amazing synthesis of Western esoteric traditions like Gnosticism, Hermeticism with Eastern religions, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism, which were just starting to become better known in the West.
So Theosophy brought ideas like karma and reincarnation to a Western audience.
Yes, it really popularized them, along with concepts like the evolution of consciousness and the existence of hidden spiritual guides, the ascended masters. It provided a comprehensive, alternative spiritual framework.
Were there other important 19th century threads?
Definitely New Thought. This movement emerged later in the century and focused heavily on the power of the mind. The core idea was that your thoughts directly shape your reality, and that illness or suffering are basically mental errors you can correct through positive thinking.
So the ancestor of mind over matter and the law of attraction.
Precisely. New Thought established that very strong therapeutic self-help orientation that's still central to the New Age today.
Okay, so the 19th century built the intellectual foundations. What happened in the 20th century to make it explode into popular culture?
A few key things converged. One was the popularization of the astrological concept of the Age of Aquarius. A theosophist writer, Alice Bailey, really pushed this idea, predicting a coming era of peace and enlightenment. She even popularized the term New Age and suggested it would really take off around 1975.
Wow, quite specific.
Yeah, and then of course you have the 1960s counterculture.
Right, that seems like fertile ground.
Incredibly fertile, the whole rejection of mainstream values, the fascination with Eastern mysticism, Zen, yoga became huge, the interest in altered states of consciousness, the emphasis on personal freedom. It all created this perfect environment for these alternative spiritual ideas to flourish and spread.
And wasn't there also a psychological movement happening around the same time?
Yes, the human potential movement. This grew out of humanistic psychology, think Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. It provided the language of self-actualization, personal growth, peak experiences. It essentially reframed the spiritual quest in psychological self-help terms, making it much more accessible and appealing to a modern, often secular audience. All these streams flowing together is what really launched the New Age as a major cultural force.
So when we look at how people actually practice New Age spirituality today, it really is that spiritual supermarket we talked about. The range of techniques is just vast.
It really is. These are the tools people use, to connect with that inner divinity, heal themselves, grow personally.
Let's break some down. Maybe start with the mind, body, spirit stuff like yoga. It's everywhere now.
For sure. Yoga is probably the most mainstream example. It's adapted from its ancient Hindu roots. But in the New Age context, it's usually presented as this holistic practice. Postures, breathing, meditation, all for total well-being. It's accepted as exercise, but that spiritual dimension, well, it's still there and sometimes controversial. Some Christian critics, for instance, have raised concerns about certain poses being potentially idolatrous.
Interesting. And meditation, that seems absolutely foundational.
Totally foundational. It takes many forms, mindfulness, just being present, chanting mantras like Om, guided visualizations where you picture certain outcomes or journeys. The goal is usually inner peace, stress reduction, and ultimately connecting to that higher consciousness or true self.
Okay, beyond the self-focused practices, there's a big emphasis on divination, right? Understanding your path, maybe your destiny. Astrology is huge here.
Astrology is massive. It provides both that big picture cosmic narrative like the Age of Aquarius and very personal guidance through things like horoscopes and birth charts, looking at planetary influences on personality and life events.
And tarot cards, psychic readings. Those fit in here too.
Yeah, they're tools for seeking guidance. People use tarot cards believing they can tap into intuition or even receive messages from spirit guides. And psychic readings work on a similar premise. Then you have things like numerology, which looks for mystical meanings in numbers related to your life.
Then there's this whole world of holistic and energetic healing. That's all based on the idea of a universal life force, right? Like chi or prana.
Exactly. Concepts like the chakras, those 7 energy centers in the body, borrowed from Hindu traditions, are central. The idea is that blockages in these chakras cause physical or emotional problems, so therapies aim to open or balance them.
In crystals, they're sold everywhere.
Crystal healing is very popular. The belief is that different stones have unique vibrational frequencies that can heal, balance energy, or empower you. And then you have hands-on energy work like Reiki, where practitioners believe they're channeling universal life force energy into the client to clear blockages.
And finally, the more, let's say, explicitly metaphysical stuff, like channeling.
Yeah, channeling is basically acting as a conduit for communication from non-physical beings. This could be spirits of the deceased, angels, those ascended masters from Theosophy, sometimes even entities claiming to be extraterrestrials.
Oh, okay.
There's also a common belief in personal spirit guides or guardian angels who offer help. And of course, maybe the most famous concept popularized by The Secret is the law of attraction.
Right. Think it, and it will come.
Basically, yeah. The belief that your thoughts and intentions directly manifest your reality, good or bad, like attracts like. So this huge menu of practices really shows that spiritual supermarket in action. Lots of tools for the journey of self-discovery.
What's truly fascinating, though, is how few people actually label themselves New Agers.
Right. Very few.
Yet these ideas are just everywhere, deeply embedded in mainstream culture. They've kind of become these background assumptions about health, happiness, spirituality. It's like an invisible religion.
That's a perfect way to put it. Its real success isn't in membership numbers, but in subtly shifting the cultural landscape. Look at the wellness industry. It's worth trillions globally. And its core concept, holistic health, the idea that mind, body, and spirit are all connected. That's pure New Age thinking gone mainstream.
You see it everywhere. Aromatherapy, acupuncture, mindfulness apps, corporate wellness programs, the whole self-care movement, the emphasis on natural and organic. It's just integrated.
Totally integrated. And it provides the perfect language for that growing group of people who identify as spiritual but not religious SBNR.
Ah, good point.
These are people who reject the structures of organized religion but still want something spiritual. The New Age focus on self-authority, personal experience, picking and choosing what resonates. It fits the SBNR mindset perfectly. Pew Research has even shown that tons of Americans, including people who identify as Christian, hold beliefs like reincarnation or astrology or believe in psychics.
It's seeped into entertainment too, hasn't it? Like New Age music was a whole genre.
Yeah, it started in the 70s with artists creating ambient meditative music. Then artists like Enya, Yanni Evangelista, remember the Chariots of Fire theme, brought that sound to huge audiences. It creates that specific mood, that calm spiritual vibe.
And movies.
Oh, definitely. Think about the Force in Star Wars. It's basically an impersonal, universal energy field connecting everything. Classic New Age concept, James Cameron's Avatar with the planet Awa, this interconnected life force.
Right.
It's a very pantheistic worldview. And then you have movies like Eat, Pray, Love or The Celestine Prophecy, which are explicitly about the New Age spiritual quest. These stories about finding your inner power, connecting to something mystical, they resonate because the ideas are already in the cultural water supply.
So really the takeaway is that New Age hasn't succeeded by building a big institution, but by subtly reshaping how we in the West think about ourselves, our potential, and our spiritual paths, making it more individualistic, more therapeutic, more of a private quest.
Absolutely. But that pervasiveness hasn't come without criticism. There are some pretty significant critiques we should probably touch on. One big one is the accusation of pseudoscience, especially misusing concepts from quantum physics.
Ah, yes, so the quantum woo phenomenon. How does that work?
Well, it often involves taking really complex, counterintuitive ideas from quantum mechanics like the observer effect or entanglement, which apply only at the subatomic level, and then applying them metaphorically or just incorrectly to our everyday macroscopic world.
So like saying the observer effect proves that our consciousness literally creates our reality.
Exactly. Or using entanglement, the weird connection between particles, to prove that all is one on a cosmic scale. Figures like Fritjof Capra with the Tao of Physics, or Deepak Chopra talking about quantum healing, or that film What the Bleep Do We Know, really popularized these kinds of interpretations.
And how do actual physicists feel about this?
Overwhelmingly dismissive. They generally see it as quantum flapdoodle, or misuse based on superficial language similarities, not real science. Quantum effects just don't scale up that way. Einstein himself argued against mystical readings of quantum mechanics way back. The criticism is that it's an attempt to borrow scientific legitimacy without doing the scientific work.
Okay, another critique is about commodification, right? Mixed spirituality.
Yes, the argument that New Age turns spirituality into just another product to be bought and sold in the marketplace.
Like selling crystals, tarot decks, expensive workshops.
Exactly. The sheer volume of products and services, crystals, oils, readings, courses, retreats. And the internet has put this into hyperdrive. You can buy enlightenment online, basically.
And the critique is that this trivializes things, makes it superficial.
That's the core of it. That it reduces deep spiritual traditions to consumer goods, makes the quest about acquiring things or experiences rather than inner transformation. It can become more about crafting a spiritual aesthetic for show. And you even see multi-level marketing companies using spiritual language to sell essential oils or supplements, blurring the lines completely. Critics see it as undermining values like non-attachment.
Then there's the really thorny issue of cultural appropriation.
This is a major ethical concern raised in many analyses. Because of that pick-and-mix approach, New Age practices often involve borrowing, some say stealing sacred practices, symbols, and concepts from non-Western or indigenous cultures, often stripping them entirely of their original context and meaning.
Can you give some examples?
Sure, taking Hindu concepts like yoga or chakras and divorcing them from their deep philosophical roots just to use them for Western self-improvement. Or, even more controversially, you see situations where, say, white individuals position themselves as shamans, selling versions of Native American ceremonies like sweat lodges or smudging practices that indigenous communities often view as sacred and not for sale, condemning it as cultural theft and exploitation.
And the harm is?
The harm is multi-layered. It distorts the original meaning, erases the cultural and historical context, often benefits members of the dominant culture financially at the expense of the originators, and can reinforce old colonial power dynamics.
Okay, finally, there are critiques focused on the psychological side, sometimes called the shadow of the self. What does that involve?
This looks at the potential downsides of that intense focus on the individual and positivity. One issue is spiritual bypassing.
What?
It's using spiritual ideas or practices to avoid dealing with uncomfortable feelings, psychological wounds, or difficult real-world problems. Like insisting on love and light to the point where you ignore injustice or your own unresolved anger or grief. It becomes a form of escapism.
And related to that is toxic positivity.
Yes, especially connected to ideas like the law of attraction. If you believe you create everything in your reality with your thoughts, it can lead to this really harmful idea that people are solely responsible for their own suffering, their illness, their poverty, whatever.
Which leads to victim blaming.
Exactly. It can foster a lack of compassion because someone else's misfortune might just be seen as a result of their negative thinking. And it can lead to intense self-blame when things inevitably go wrong in your own life.
What about ego? Doesn't focusing so much on your own divinity risk inflating the ego?
That's the critique of spiritual narcissism. While many traditions aim to transcend the ego, the constant New Age emphasis on your power, your divinity, you are a god goddess, can, paradoxically, end up massively inflating the ego. The search for the higher self can become a justification for self-centeredness, a lack of humility, or an inability to take criticism.
And lastly, moral relativism. If my truth is the only truth.
Then it can become difficult to make shared ethical judgments or hold people accountable based on common moral standards. If everything is subjective, objective right and wrong can dissolve. And really, all these critiques, the pseudoscience, the commodification, the appropriation, the psychological shadows, they often tie back to that foundational principle of radical individualism. It creates the space for these issues to arise.
Looking forward, it seems like digital technology is the next big frontier shaping the new age. The internet isn't just a tool anymore, is it?
Not at all. It's fundamentally changing the landscape. Platforms like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, they've become the main channels now, far more than bookstores or physical centers. I mean, the access is global and instant. You can find guided meditations, tarot tutorials, astrology forecasts, anything, anywhere, anytime.
And this has created a new kind of leader, the spiritual influencer.
Exactly. Their authority doesn't come from decades of study or a traditional lineage. It comes from, well, perceived authenticity online, relatability, being good at social media. They embody that unmediated individualism. Their curated life becomes the teaching.
It feels like a double-edged sword, this digital connection.
It really is. On the plus side, it allows people to find community, connect with like-minded seekers across the globe, maybe overcome feelings of isolation. That's powerful.
But the downsides?
Well, the constant distraction of notifications isn't exactly conducive to deep introspection, is it? And the curated perfection you see online can fuel feelings of inadequacy, pushing people towards spiritual materialism, collecting the right crystals, the right yoga outfits, crafting the right online persona, rather than doing the inner work.
And the algorithms.
Yes. The algorithms can act like a new kind of invisible guru. They feed you more of what you already like, reinforcing your existing beliefs, potentially creating echo chambers that shield you from different perspectives or challenges you might need for real growth.
So the internet kind of supercharges the existing New Age tendencies.
In many ways, yes. The spiritual supermarket goes global with infinite choice. The pick and mix approach gets refined by algorithms, commercialization gets amplified, and complex ideas risk getting flattened into shareable memes, sound bites, and 60-second videos. Depth can be sacrificed for breadth.
So wrapping this all up, New Age spirituality is this really fascinating paradox, isn't it?
It really is. It starts as a reaction against tradition, against materialism, but ends up deeply reflecting the individualism and consumer culture it often critiques. Its enduring appeal seems to be that promise of personal empowerment, spiritual meaning, and freedom, all without the old rules and dogmas.
And that appeal has been so strong that its core ideas, holistic health, self-discovery, the power of the mind, are now just woven into the fabric of wellness culture, therapy, self-help. They shape how many of us think, even if we don't use the New Age label.
It's become part of the cultural background noise, often unnoticed but influential. And looking ahead as it continues to morph in the digital age, with influencers and algorithms shaping the experience, it keeps evolving.
Which leaves us with something for you, our listener, to think about. As spirituality becomes increasingly digital, maybe even moving into immersive virtual reality realms, promising direct access to transcendence. What does that mean for authenticity? For manipulation? For the commercial exploitation of that timeless human search for meaning? How crucial does critical thinking and maybe your own discerning personal responsibility become in navigating this constantly shifting spiritual landscape? Something to ponder until our next deep dive.